Hello, happy Friday. I hope that you are keeping well, and I hope that today is a better day than yesterday. And, right, I am going to be reading chapter 9 from The Hidden Life of Trees, and that's written by an author, Peter Wohlleben. He's actually German. This book was translated to English, but it's originally written in German. And the title of this chapter is Destination North. And I think that instead of me going on some kind of multi-dimensional tangent, I'm just going to try and keep to reading this. Okay, let's go. Trees can't walk. Everyone knows that. Be that as it may, they need to hit the road somehow. But how can they do this without feet? The answer lies in the transition to the next generation. Every tree has to stay where it put down roots as a seedling. However, it can reproduce, and in that brief moment when tree embryos are still packed into seeds, they are free. The moment they fall from the tree, the journey can begin. Some species are in a big hurry. They equip their offspring with fine hairs so that they can drift off to the next wind. Sorry, I did not read that properly. They equip their offspring with fine hairs so that they can drift off on the next wind, light as a feather. Species that rely on this strategy have to grow tiny seeds so that they are light enough to float away. Poplars and willows produce minute flyers like this and send them off on half-mile long journeys. The advantage of long-distance travel is offset by the disadvantage that the seeds contain hardly any provisions. The sprouting seed quickly uses up its energy reserves, making it highly susceptible to starvation and thirst. The seeds of birches, maples, hornbeams, ash, and conifers are somewhat heavier. At this weight, flight in a feathery coating is no longer practical, so these trees equip their fruit with flying aids. Some species, such as conifers, have an efficient winged design for their seeds, which works well to slow the seeds as they fall. If a storm blows through when the seeds are falling, they can travel for about a mile. Species that produce heavy fruit, such as oaks, chestnuts, or beeches, could never cover such distances. Therefore, they avoid any kind of structural assistance and instead enter into an alliance with the animal world. Mice, squirrels, and most definitely the squirrels. I've seen this in action. Oh my goodness. Anyway, there's a neighborhood squirrel that often comes to bury little nuts or like whatever it is that it finds into my little garden beds. And when I'm, sometimes when I'll be sort of laying a new bed, or I'll find like a patch of the bed that's like nothing seems to be sprouting from that area, and then I sort of like check it out, and lo and behold, underneath is like this huge nut or covered thing, and with some kind of hard shell. And I just think it's, well, I mean, I'll take that as a compliment. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And this particular squirrel, I have seen it. It is like I don't know if it, it learned from sort of other animals certain ways of moving through the trees, because it's quite dynamic. This one time, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. The squirrel had gotten hold of a green apple, and and I saw it going across the branch, and obviously I was like, what? And it was so interesting. Like, obviously the squirrel's jaw or teeth, I don't know, is strong enough, and I don't quite know how it saw through this apple that it had a bite into that was literally bigger than its face. But I just think that's pretty amazing. And yeah, that's the only time I've ever seen an apple move like that along the branches of trees. Anyway, sorry, it's just, yeah, I wonder where that squirrel is. I think it would be nice for it to come and visit. Hopefully that it gets that message. Sorry. Mice, squirrels, and jays love oily, starchy seeds. They tuck them into the forest floor as winter provisions, and there the seeds often stay, lost or no longer needed. Sometimes a hungry, tawny owl scoops down, and a yellow-necked mouse ends up as a meal itself. And so the little rodent makes its contribution to the next generation of trees. Small though it might be. These mice often bury their winter stores directly at the base of the trunk of a mighty beech whose nuts they gather. There are lots of small dry holes among the roots, and little creatures love to live in them. If a mouse has moved in, you'll find husks of completely consumed beech nuts piled in front. At least a few of these stockpiles are buried a few yards from the tree on the open forest floor. After the death of the mouse, they sprout the following spring and become the new forest. Okay. The jay transports heavy seeds the farthest. It carries acorns and beech nuts a few miles away. The squirrel manages only a few hundred yards. That is interesting information. Whereas mice bury their supplies barely more than 30 feet from the tree. So if you are a heavy fruited species, you're certainly not going to get anywhere quickly. However, the large reserves of food in the seed are cushioned to ensure the seedling has a good chance of surviving its first year, in a way that relates to why one shouldn't why one should try and keep in mind that that our cushioning is important, is especially for our organs. And you know, if you don't have enough of that cushioning, your organs are more at risk, or you're more at risk of being damaged. So Mickey is flying again. I don't know why it does that anyway. Anyway, so if for example, if you have like a really, like, just abnormally like a risky low like body fat percentage, it can get dangerous when it's like at such a low percentage, because the cushioning, or the fat that is between the organs, is way less. So yeah, and just generally everywhere. So for example, if you were to fall down, or have some kind of accident, not that I'm speaking that over live, I'm just trying to just say something important and relevant, and it's something that I learned recently, and I think that it's important to know, um, especially when it's got to do with like your body and your weight and the different um, the different um, elements of stores that you're supposed to have in your body to keep it safe, to keep it functional. And when you're starved and thirsty and there's not much energy and you're tired, exhausted, depleted, and then you're not additionally getting enough nutrients, or or just there's just not anything sort of uh, coming in that's enough to firstly refeed, or and even further than that, like renourish or restore weight, or restore the certain cushioning or reserves to a point where that's sufficient to function and be able to get through every day. And also, yeah, it's that's safer. That's safer. Anyway, I suppose I'm saying that for whoever needs to hear that, and I'm saying that I suppose for me as well. And it just sort of came up in my memory, and I appreciate that. It's a good reminder. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, let me just read that part again. However, the large reserves of food in the seed are a cushion to ensure the seedling has a good chance of surviving its first year. This means that light-seeded poplars and willows can open up new habitats much more quickly. For example, when a volcanic eruption shuffles the cards in the deck of life and the game starts over. But because these trees don't get very old and allow a lot of light to reach the ground, tree species that arrive on the scene later eventually take over. But why make the journey at all? Couldn't the forest just stay right where it is, where things are comfortable and pleasant? Opening up new places to live is necessarily primarily... Oh, it's... oh, making mistakes today. It's okay. Opening up new places to live is necessary, primarily because the climate is always changing. It's changing very slowly, to be sure, over the course of many hundreds of years, but eventually, despite whatever built-in tolerance trees might have, it will become too warm, too cold, too dry, or too wet for a particular species. Then the trees must depart for other climes, and this means packing up and moving. I wonder why it says climes and not climate. That's interesting. I'll go look that up later. Such a migration is happening in Central European forests right now. The reason is not just climate change, which has already presented us with a 1.4 degree Fahrenheit rise in the average temperature, but also the change from the last ice age to a warmer era. Ice ages are hugely influential. As the centuries get increasingly colder, trees must retreat to more southerly climes. Okay, that can't be a mistake here, it's said twice. If this shift takes place slowly over many generations, trees in Central Europe, for example, successfully relocate to the Mediterranean region. But if the ice advances quickly, it buries forests and swallows up species that have been dragging their feet. In Central Europe, 3 million years ago, you could find not only the native beaches we have today, but also large-leaved beaches. Although beaches managed to make the leap to southern Europe, the less agile, large-leafed beeches died out. One reason for their demise was the Alps. Oh, I have a story there, but anyway, this mountain range forms a natural barrier that blocked the trees' escape route. To cross the Alps, the trees had to first settle high terrain before descending once more to more comfortable elevations. That's quite a beautiful sentence. To cross the Alps, the trees had to first settle high terrain before descending once more to more comfortable elevations. But higher places are too cold for many trees, even in interglacial periods, so the fortunes of many species ended when they reached the tree line. Today, you can no longer find large-leafed beeches in Central Europe, but you can find them in eastern North America, where they are known simply as American beeches. The reference to their large leaves can be found in their Latin name, Fagus grandifolia. Grandis means big, and folia means leaves. American beeches survived because there is no inconvenient east-west mountain range blocking movement from north to south on the North American continent. They could make their way south without hindrance and then move back north after the Ice Age was over. Along with a few other tree species, the beeches of Central Europe somehow managed to make it over the Alps and survive in protected locations until our current interglacial period. The road has been open for these relatively few species for thousands of years, and today they are marching north, still, as it were, following the trail of the melting ice. As soon as the climate warmed up, the germinating seedlings were in luck again. They grew to be mature trees and scattered new seeds that progressed north mile by mile. The average speed of the beech's journey, by the way, is about a quarter mile a year. Sure. Beeches are particularly slow. Their seeds are carried off by jays less often than the acorns are, and other species spread themselves using the wind and occupy areas much more quickly. When the easygoing beeches returned about 4,000 years ago, the forest was already occupied by oaks and hazels. That was no big deal for the beeches, and you are already familiar with their strategy. They take a lot more shade than other trees and therefore have no difficulty sprouting at their feet. The small amount of light that oaks and hazels allow to reach the ground is sufficient for the tiny conquistadors to keep on growing upward and one day break through the crowns of the competition. What had to happen, happened. The beeches grew up and over the species that had been there earlier and robbed them of the light they needed to survive. Their merciless, triumphal march stretches as far north as southern Sweden today, but it is not over yet. Or rather, it wouldn't have been over had people not interfered. Okay. Again, I would like to state, I'm reading this from a book that was written, and that's, yeah, okay. Written and published is, you can get a copy for yourself, most likely in many, many different places, wherever you live. So, yeah, it's just, I'm trying to just be, cautionate. I'll make up that word. When beeches arrived, the European forefathers were beginning to make massive changes to forest ecosystems. They were clearing trees around their settlements to make room for fields for their crops and clear-cutting more areas for livestock. And because even this was not enough, people were simply driving their cattle and pigs into the forest. For beeches, this was catastrophic. Their offspring had to endure centuries at ground level before they were allowed to grow. In those days, their topmost buds were defenseless and at the mercy of browsing animals. Originally, there had been very few mammals around because dense forests offer little food. Before people arrived on the odds of beaches hanging out for 200 years undisturbed and uneaten were high. But then came a constant stream of herders with their hungry livestock gobbling up their tasty buds. In areas where light now fell because trees had been cut down, other species of trees previously overshadowed by the beaches took over. This severely hindered the post-Ice Age migration of beaches, and to this day, there are areas in Europe they have not yet colonized. In the past few centuries, hunting has come to European forests as well, which paradoxically considerably increased the numbers of deer and wild boar. That's interesting. Thanks to massive feeding programs by hunters who are mostly interested in increasing the number of antler-bearing stags, the population grew until today it is up to 5 times its natural level. German-speaking regions have one of the highest concentration of herbivores in the world, so small beaches are finding it harder than ever to survive. Sorry. And forestry is restricting their spread as well. In southern Sweden, where beeches could comfortably grow, it's one spruce or pine plantation after another. Except for a few individual trees, there are hardly any beeches to be found there, but they are ready and waiting. The moment people stop interfering, they will resume their northward migration. The slowest of the migrants is the European silver fir, the only species of fir native to Germany. Its name comes from its light grey bark, which makes it easy to distinguish from spruce, which have a red-brown bark. The silver fir, like most tree species, waited out the Ice Age in southern Europe, probably in Italy, the Balkans, and Spain. It migrated from there, following the other trees at a rate of 300 yards a year. Spruce and pines pulled ahead because their seeds are considerably lighter and better flyers. Even the beeches with their heavy nuts were faster, thanks to the jays. Apparently, silver firs had developed the wrong strategy because their seeds are not good at flying, even though they are equipped with a small sail to catch the wind, and they are too small to be distributed by birds. Although there are birds that eat the seeds of fir trees, that's of minimal use to the conifers. The nutcracker, which prefers the seeds of the Swiss pine but will eat the seeds of firs, gathers the seeds and stockpiles them. But in contrast with the jay, which hides acorns and beech nuts in soil all over the place, the nutcracker bird forgets a seed or two because there's no water, the abandoned seeds never sprout. Life is hard for silver firs. Whereas most of Central Europe's native trees are well on their way to Scandinavia by now, silver firs have made it only as far as the Harz Mountains in northern Germany. But what difference does it make to a tree if it's a few hundred years late? After all, firs tolerate deep shade and can grow under beeches. They gradually insinuate themselves even into established old forests and can eventually grow into mighty trees. Their Achilles heel is that they are detectable to deer. Right now, these herbivores are preventing silver firs from migrating farther north because in some places they are gobbling up every last seedling. And why is the beech so competitive in Central Europe? Or to put it another way, if it can prevail so well against all other species in Europe, why isn't it found all over the world? The answer is simple. Its strengths are advantageous only in the region's climatic conditions, which are influenced by the relative proximity of the Atlantic Ocean. Apart from up in the mountains, where beaches don't grow on the upper slopes, temperatures don't fluctuate very much. Cool summers are followed by warm winters, and precipitation is between 20 and 60 inches a year, just the way the beaches like it. Water is one of the key factors of growth in the forest, and this is where the beaches score big time. To produce 1 pound of wood, they need 22 gallons of water. Does this sound like a lot? Most other species of tree need up to 36 gallons, almost twice as much, and that is the deciding factor that enables beeches to shoot up quickly and suppress other species. Spruce are predisposed to guzzle water because in their cool, moist comfort zone in farther northern regions, drought is unheard of. In Central Europe, only zones just below the tree line offer the conditions spruce enjoy. It rains a lot here, and thanks to the low temperatures, there's hardly any evaporation. Trees growing at these elevations can afford to waste water. In most lower-lying areas, however, the frugal beeches come out ahead. Even in dry years, beeches put on a decent amount of growth and quickly tower over the heads of the spendthrifts. The offspring of the competition suffocate in the thick layer of leaves on the ground, but the beech seedlings have no problem pushing their way through. Beeches' intensive use of light, which leaves nothing for the other species, and their ability to create for themselves the humid microclimate they enjoy, to build up a good supply of humus on the ground, and to gather water with their branches, make them unbeatable in Central Europe today. But only in this part of the world. As soon as the climate warms up and becomes more Mediterranean, these trees are going to have a hard time. They can't tolerate constantly hot, dry summers and bitterly cold winters, and they will have to step aside for other species, such as oaks. Hot summers and cold winters prevail in Eastern Europe. Although Scandinavian summers are still acceptable, the colder times of the year that far north are also not for the beech. And in the sunny south, they like to settle only in the higher elevations where it's not quite so hot. Because of the climate it needs, therefore, the beech is currently trapped in Central Europe. Climate change is making the north warmer, and so in the future it will be able to expand its range in this direction. At the same time, it will eventually get so hot to the south that the tree's whole range will shift in a northerly direction. Now, so now the title of that chapter makes sense. Because it said direction north. So, that is so interesting. This was basically about the movement of trees, and wow, trees travel. They go on journeys. It's just amazing. My goodness. Sure. Okay. No, again, you learn something new every day. Okay, so the next chapter is going to be chapter 30, and the title is Tough Customers. So, anyway, so before this hits 30 minutes, I'd just like to conclude by thanking you if you have been listening and following along with this with each chapter, and if you're following along with the book as well, if you did get the book, and thank you for I'm trying not to say thank you for your time and attention. But you know, that is something that is something that I'm definitely grateful for. And yeah, I truly hope that there is something in all this that you've been able to enjoy. God bless you.